zone. He gets the try.
The Red 78.
We're both Munster people.
Carberry gets over the line. Try from Munster.
Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
Hello and welcome along. I'm Alan Quinlan and you're listening to episode 43 of the Red 78 here on the Rugby channel. And with me as always is my partner in crime, Niamh Briggs. You're very welcome, Niamh. Not a great weekend again. We spoke last week about it being a must-win for Munster and that Ulster could afford to lose one. But unfortunately, from a Munster point of view, they didn't get the win. They didn't get the points that they badly needed, and it's the fifth loss in 7 games. We'll go through, those 7 games a little bit more in detail, but it's another hard one to take for Munster and a difficult weekend. Disappointment, lots of injuries, lots of young players getting exposed, and as ever, we want to hear from the fans. We want to hear what the people who go to the match, the people who are watching, the Munster fans. I put out a tweet yesterday and there's a big reaction again. So you're going to read out some of the tweets and the feelings of the fans after the weekend.
Yeah, look, I think it was disappointing, I think, at times during that game the other day. But like, it seems to be the theme. We're only speaking about it off air that we seem to be getting this, feel like we're saying the same messages over and over again in relation to loads of green shoots. But it's just taken time to come together. I think, as you say, there was loads of tweets and response. And Joe Cashman says, forgetting the result, it was great to see younger lads getting games like this and exposure. It will stand to us in the long run. Crowley will take the 10 shirt for his own the way he's going. Well, that's good stuff about Crowley. Dave, missing the bulk, power and pack due to injuries. Crowley is our 10. Line-out needs work. Handling ruck protection, still an issue. Anne Fitzgerald, hopefully some green shoots, but still worries about how we're going to build up the pack. I think Munster should refuse to have Frank Murphy as ref. Eye contact, choking, 2 spear tackles ignored, really bad for the sport. Kevin Norris, Frank Murphy gets a lot of stick for his decisions, but he cannot be blamed for the lineup misfiring, indecision and the knock-ons. Joe, referee and TMO were poor. Crowley, Hodnett, Dogbo, Barron, all excellent. Great to see Candillan and Ryan back too. Line-out needs urgent attention. Maldi, very underpowered with players out. Ireland need a run of wind at this stage, starting with Connacht. I think that's kind of been...
Just before you go on, I think there was a lot spoken about Frank Murphy and probably a frustration, the referee on Saturday night. Having watched the game back, obviously watching it live and then watching it back, I think there's some inconsistencies. There's a few decisions like every referee may get wrong. I think when you're at home, they get the Munster fans are probably hard on some of his calls. But one of your tweeters there that are speaking saying you can't blame Frank Murphy for the loss and the poor execution at times, the line-out malfunction. And that's a very important point. I think when I look back at the game, and to be fair to Frank, he's very strict, he's vocal, he's a very good referee. I sense that the reaction from Munster fans was well over the top. In my opinion, it's well over the top. There were some decisions, yes, that you could argue, but the referee wasn't the reason why Munster lost the game the other day. I think we'll talk about that in a minute, and I'm interested to get your opinion. But some of Munster's play was poor and not good enough again. And I think you can talk about harsh lessons and getting exposed in young players, but some of the execution, particularly a couple of lineouts there that were really, really badly executed, and they can be vital. One lost lineout in a game can cost you a game. So it's an interesting one because there was a lot said about the referee. I think some of it is a little bit too much, a little bit unfair. I think we'll debate the decisions in a few minutes. There was a couple of big decisions in the game. But anyway, you have more tweets.
Tom Lonergan tweets in a bit, says, well, lads, least said about the first half, the better. Second half, far more fighting spirit from the lads. Took goalman's eaves to break the line. We were only the width of a post away from the win. I can't believe that seatbelt on Zeeves at the end was not seen, not looked at, ignored. Jason Tewig, 55 players used so far this season. That can't be helping results, but it's aiding player development. Was at the game. We did the hard part well, keeping Ulster to 12-point lead into a stiff wind, but couldn't complete the task. Inexperience the main issue right now.
Just on that point, Niamh, 55 players. It's pretty unprecedented after 7 games for any side to use that many players. Now, people can correct us if we're wrong. And I know Leinster, to be fair to them, a lot of the time get up around that number or possibly even more throughout the season because they have so many internationals away. But that's an incredible amount of players, isn't it? 55 players. It shows that you're not just going down to second, third, but you're down to fourth, fifth choice, sixth choice in some positions. And the biggest glaring issue at the moment and at the weekend was the second row position. Like, who would have thought, who knew, like, to be fair, you and I knew, but I mean this respectfully to people, who knew very much about Edwin Adogbo before the season started? Not many people. There's friends of mine in Tipperary and rugby people, when he kind of came on the scene there to start the season, played a few games. Where's this guy come from? Where's he from? Who's he played with before? So the depth chart is way down. And now on Saturday night, Adogbo kind of was 50-50 about making that game. But he was a big player. They needed him for that game. Owen O'Connor played in the second row with him as well. We haven't seen him play. I think the Wasps was the last time he was involved. So it's very, very telling the amount of players that they have used. And I think, look, we've got to be realistic and fair. We'll be critical around some of the mistakes that are being made. But the hand they're being dealt at the moment is a very difficult one. And it's hard to get any sort of cohesion. Yeah.
Just the last few there. So Liam Sweeney, young players are starting to shine and improve every game. Crowley is showing some class and currently the better 10 at the moment. Edward Malloy, maybe Munster have to be allowed this season as time when older players are replaced by the younger lads. It's obvious the older lads are wrecked from years of effort, but still have a lot to offer, but only in backup roles from now. Results at the minute are not great, but there's a good Munster team there for the next few years. From Donegal, good back five, talented halfbacks and back three players. However, they will win nothing without a front row, and a centre combo seems the two positions Munster never produced in. It was a close match, disappointing we didn't get the win. Crowley played great once again. I feel if we had our line out working properly, we could have done it. Roll on the next match and onwards and upwards. Great atmosphere at the park. First half Maul defence was very poor. Small errors in our thought process cost us. Crowley played fantastic, although with the wind in the second half, not sure why we did not see Healy. Optimistic, but we need wins. Simon is a little bit optimistic. Good performance from a young Munster team versus a good Ulster team. Serious bright future ahead. Crowley, Hodnett, Dogbo, Condell and Barron and Daly. Probably no Champions Cup next year, but I take that for a proper contender the year after. I think we might be a bit away from that. Another positive step on the journey. Munster paid the penalty for too many basic infringements and really poor execution at the line out. It has to go down as an average game we could have won. And here's the thing, there's been a couple of those ones that, the Dragons game and, Connacht maybe and the Ulster game where I felt like that we could have won those games, and maybe previous years, those experienced players would have kind of dragged everybody else through, if that makes sense. And I just think at the moment, we're not far off things clicking. You can see it. You can see the intent. I was at the game the other day. I thought there was loads of really good stuff, but it's a bit like in soccer where you look at that last pass, that crucial piece of, that last third. It's almost like the last pop, the last ruck, the last, in that power zone. We just seem to be kind of either losing concentration or maybe getting ahead of ourselves and thinking way too far ahead as opposed to just, thinking in that moment, which I think is just probably been the most frustrating part.
Is that down to experience? And
yeah, I think it is.
And form in some players as well.
Yeah, hugely. Look, I think a couple of things. I was really surprised that when we went into the scoring zone, Ulster scoring zone, like our 22, that we just didn't have a simplistic banker ball for a line out. I think there was way too much movement, and I don't know, a huge amount. But that was kind of my thought process when I was looking at it live. I was like, what's with all the movement? Like, just go up and let's try and get something simple. You might be able to tell me that that's complete another, like,
No, I
nonsense.
think,
But
yeah, that's a confidence thing as well. I think there was one line out in that first half where Munster kicked down into the corner. It was inside the 22 and totally mistimed jump. Throw was poor from Dermot Byrne and ball goes out over the back. And you've got to build pressure in those moments. And
yeah,
it's a harsh lesson, even from being a coach, when you're reviewing this stuff and you're showing it to players and they're better the next time. So like it's kind of unfair. It's not just if you that you have to go through this. I think they need to be better at this. They need to be sharper. And it's tough on Andy Kiriakou when there's a lot of guys coming in and out. You've limited game time during the week to work on these lineouts and get them right. There has to be an understanding, and you develop an understanding around your lineout. And I've always said this when we played, we had so many lineout leaders in the group. You think if Paul O'Connell and Donnacha O'Callaghan didn't play, well, Dunners didn't call the lineouts anyway. He was just told where to go and when to jump and how to jump, and he was brilliant at that. And he won't mind me saying, he wasn't someone who was going to be calling lineouts. But Paul, then you had Mick O'Driscoll, you had Donnacha Ryan coming through,
Billy Holland.
Yeah, a number of players, and you have those lineout leaders. You have to, and obviously, if you've loads of depth in lineout leaders, it's beneficial. But also your back row players. There was a lot of times David Wallace would be standing at the back of the lineup with his hands in his hips, and he's supposed to lift me or lift Dennis Leamy or Axel or someone, and there'd be a missed line-out throw, and Paul would go absolutely furious. So it takes time to develop that, and to get to a point where everyone's on the same hymn sheet, and you actually nearly know where the ball is going to be called in the lineup when you go into it, because you can nearly start seeing where the space is, and you can react to what your caller is going to do. So I think obviously that comes with experience, and they're lacking that at the moment, and it's costly because there's a number of lineouts, and we'll talk about the stats and review the 7 matches so far in the league in a couple of minutes, but it's very, very costly.
Yeah, look, hugely. I think if we're going to start talking about the game now, I feel like that Munster, it's like Ulster had 3 attempts into, like they had 5 attempts into Munster's 22 overall, but they had 3 were like the first 3 attempts, and they had 3 tries, I think, and that's an incredibly frustrating stat, considering that last weekend we had the ability to keep Leinster out for very long periods on both sides of the half, and I just think the Maul D last weekend it just you know what it was? It just showed the inexperience of the group. Like Munster pride themselves on their defensive maul.
Yeah, but it also shows, and we have to give credit to Ulster here.
Oh yeah, they had really good. Yeah.
I know there's one or two sneaky Ulster fans listening in here to the podcast as well, and they're very welcome. Ulster were good. Their maul has been superb this year. They've scored a lot of tries. They've caused problems for all the teams they've played with their maul. So it had that inevitability about it when, they've got a penalty outside of 22 and Burns is kicking into the corner. You're thinking, this is trouble for Munster. I think Klein and Thomas Ahern are a big loss there, particularly Klein, because that's one of his big strengths is breaking up mauls and his physicality. And Munster were a little bit high. They stopped it a couple of times. For the James Hume try, they stopped them, and they stopped a couple in the second half. But their reaction needs to be quicker. They need to be a little bit cuter at how they break up the opposition maul. But credit to Ulster. They're very, very strong in there. I just want to read one out from John Sexton. This is a bigger picture one about the financial side of the possibility of not making Europe. I think Munster need to go on a run. And we'll talk about the games they have coming up. They need a little bit of luck with some of the players, but again, that's John Klein, Thomas Ahern are out for a period of time now. Thomas Ahern is getting an operation. I think could be a couple of months. But anyway, John Sexton asks off-field question: since it's unlikely we're going to qualify for the Champions Cup, that's a fair comment. Barring a small miracle, with only 2 wins from 7. And some very tough games left, with the finances in a tough position already with COVID. How will this financially affect Munster retaining players with long-term planning, presuming when Munster will have budgeted for this scenario? not sure you can have budgeted for this scenario. Everybody was under pressure coming out of COVID. How will this affect Graham Rowntree, his reign going forward? Do you think he'll be afforded time if they don't qualify for Europe? So will it be kind of a red line scenario here if they don't qualify? So how does this affect the coaches, Graham Rowntree, and how does it affect Munster financially? Not easy on both fronts.
No, it's not. The financial ramifications will be huge if they don't make Europe. But on the flip of that, when you are going with a really young group, do you forsake that financial ramification, knowing that, you know, if you end up going into the Challenge Cup and you win it, does that fill you with a bit of confidence because you've got your hands on some silverware? I don't know. I think the tradition of Munster being in that Champions Cup, the old Heineken Cup, is huge, and it's what they live off. And I think, you know, you used to speak about it a lot. Your era used to speak about it. This era speaks about it a lot. That on Heineken Cup or Champions Cup week, there's a different air training. There's different intensity. There's, and if you're not there, do you lose that? Look, it's a very difficult predicament. I think that for them right now, this is going to sound really cliche, but they just got to think about next game scenario. So Connacht is the next game up. How do they, you know, they welcome to Thorn Park. How do they get the best out of that? How do they keep getting better and developing? And then probably at the end of the season or after Christmas, when you know where you stand in terms of results, then you can start looking down the road. But look, the financial ramifications will be huge.
I think it's something for post-Christmas, I think, or even, you know, January,
and there was
February,
a lot of chat, to be fair, in the stand about it the other day, Quinny. You know, there was a lot of chat.
People are talking about that. You know, for Munster not being in Europe, but you know, Munster is a big brand, and sometimes people forget they haven't won a Munster trophy in a long time, and that's but it's still a big brand and it's a big team and the history in Europe. So I think it'd be you know, really, really tough situation if they don't get in there, not just from the financial point of view, that's the obvious one, but just from a historic point of view. The competition has been synonymous with Munster, and the whole journey and all that kind of stuff has been incredible. But, you know, if they're in the Challenge Cup, then they've just got to deal with it. But that's a bit away. I think if they can, I saw an article where people are talking about judge them fairly when everybody's back, and that's probably fair. But it's a results-driven business, and they've got to get results, and they don't play now for a couple of weeks. They're missing a lot of bulk and power. But regarding Graham Rowntree and the coaches, you can't kind of judge the coaches on and start heaping pressure on them at the moment.
No, I think it's this time next year that you look at where they are.
And it's the way they're playing. It's the way they're playing. And you know, they need to be afforded time to get their own personnel, to get their own stamp, their own players on the team as well. So I think the obvious one is the financial stuff is going to be difficult. But who knows? Just we have you any more tweets, or will we move on?
No, we'll move on.
We'll move on. So we'll review the performance. So the first thing I've down here is the referee, Frank Murphy. A lot of criticism online, some contentious decisions. Dwayne Vermeulen at the start of the game with Diarmuid Byrne. Penalty against Dwayne Vermeulen. The images and the shots showed afterwards that he had Diarmuid Byrne caught by the throat and that his hand came across his face. I don't think there's any eye gouge there, but I think it's very dangerous when he's grabbing Diarmuid Byrne like that. So I'm not suggesting for a second that, you know, he eye gouged him. Very risky and dangerous, and could have and probably should have got a stern warning about that, and it should have been kind of maybe looked at. The crowd are reacting a bit. People at home mention it a lot online. It's not an eye gouge, but there's a hand across the face, and he's got to be careful. I was more concerned that he has him grabbed by the throat. But in Dwayne Vermeulen's defence, I think Diarmuid Byrne is trying to be aggressive. He counter-rucks through. Vermeulen's trying to get up to defend, and Diarmuid Byrne is holding on to the jersey. So there's a little bit of both of them at it there. But look, it's one that I just think he should have been spoken to a little bit more stern. He was told to be careful by Frank Murphy, but he could have been in a bit of trouble. He's got to be careful there, Vermeulen. The red card, yellow card scenario on Malachi Fekitoa, he's tackled. Was it a red card? Was the yellow card the right decision? Was he lucky?
I thought he was a bit lucky. Yeah, I think not so much in relation to the contact or whatever. I just think that the way the game has gone now. Although I don't know if you saw the high tackle in top 14 that didn't warrant any cards the weekend, which was absolutely outrageous. I do think he was kind of lucky because, and I think what saved him was he kind of bent at the last second, but he's very upright and he tackles a lot like that. He had done it quite a bit in the game throughout before the card, and I just think he's got to be really careful about that going forward. But and that was a big moment as well. I thought a big moment for Munster, and yeah. What do you think?
If you're refereeing the game, are you giving yellow or red?
Jeez, I don't know. I think it was a red. I think it was a contact to the head. It was shoulder to head.
I think it was a red, and I've been very big on this, and so Munster got away with one there. Niall Scannell probably should have got a yellow card for being on his knees, slapping the ball.
Right in front of the post.
To get away with that. So Munster got away with a couple there.
Yeah. I think the issue was, right, is that we're talking about, inconsistencies. So I think that there were penalties.
Give us examples, yeah.
So there's penalties, like Munster got penalised for being offside, and then, phases after that, Ulster clearly offside for a number of phases, and neither touch judge or Frank Murphy calls it. And you can clearly hear, Jack O'Donoghue saying to him, they're offside, and it's almost like, well, like, play on. I think that's where the issue was lying with the supporters, was those inconsistencies. Munster got pinged for going off their feet in their own ball in the ruck, and similarly inside their own 22, Ulster are trying to exit their zone, and their players have elbows on the ground, and you can see the lads around the ruck kind of pointing at the players on the ground and saying, they're off their feet too. And you either give both or you give none. And I think if you give both, then nobody can have, any issues, because it's literally like that referee has been consistent. It was those type of inconsistencies I felt that Frank Murphy, and we were speaking about this afterwards, I think it's incredibly difficult. It should never happen to have, for likes of Frank Murphy or Andy Brace or anybody that's attached to the province to referee these games. I think it's unfair. I think the supporters come down harder on them. I think, it's tough. And like Frank Murphy's boo coming off the pitch, and I don't like that. I don't like that. But you're just putting them in a very unfair, uncompromising position. But I did think there was definitely inconsistencies in the calls. I think that's where the issues lay, as opposed to the Big Deer Barn incident or the Fekito incident.
I think if you go back and analyse them, yeah, definitely there's an argument. I think Dan McFarland will probably be sending in some things that I think Munster might have been fortunate with a couple of things. But I think the way this is heightened is because of the crowd noise and some of those offsides or midfield offsides that you can see where Munster were pulled for a couple. I think the assistant referees need to help him more there and make those calls. There was definitely one, was it Fekitoa that was offside and he got pulled for it, or Shane Daly. So I think there's he needs to get more help there. But so yeah, there's Frank Murphy got some criticism there. I think some of it is a little bit unfair. I think there's one or two decisions that could have went the other way for definite. But I think Munster
you're putting them in a really difficult position, because they you play for the province and it's very tough. They're an Irish referee, you're refereeing an Irish derby. I just think that's a really difficult thing to do. So I just think you take all that away by the URC should be putting referees from outside of Ireland into those derby games.
Yeah, it's difficult to get them in that situation as well. But yeah, that's something that maybe Frank didn't need to be getting, and certainly doesn't deserve to get abuse coming off the field. It's frustrating for fans, and I don't like to see that either. It's a tough job being a referee. You need eyes in the back of your head to see stuff that's going on. But I think he needs more support. Andy Brace, I think, called one in the first half, but probably a little bit more support from from the other assistant as well, and try and work together as a unit. The positives from the game so quickly, because we don't want to
Diarmuid Brown
overlabour
making line
this.
breaks, John Ryan making line breaks, Jack Crowley played really, really well. I think I thought Mike Haley was really, really good, really solid. And I just think that the way that Munster tried to play, we can talk about the lack of execution and we can talk about the mistakes down the line, but in terms of where they're going and what they're trying to do, constantly trying to move the ball, they're looking to get the edges, and they're looking to pull defenders out of the line and be able to move the ball into those spaces. And I just thought at times they did really well. Thought they defended quite well. It's just going back to the old age, discipline and lack of execution.
I think if Munster were to win that game, particularly with the second half performance, it would be seen as a massive step forward, because I think the way they played in the second half, Ulster didn't really fire a shot as regards their attack, and I think they'd have been disappointed with that. Stephen Ferris on Premier was talking about that. I thought it was pretty telling. He was disappointed with that Ulster didn't kick on. They were in a great position after the first half. If Doak gets the
was a big window. Can I just say something, right? There was a big wind. Might not have shown it on television.
No, I know that.
It was pretty big.
I know that. And they tried to manage the game a little bit more than go for it. They're trying to keep it very direct. But look, they showed that strength and power in the first half and could have been further ahead. I think the positive that you're mentioning is the reaction by Munster in the second half. The try they scored, Shane Daly try, that attack, some of the other shape that they're showing is a lot better. So look, I think Munster people would applaud that and say that that's something to give a bit of enthusiasm.
Can I just say something in relation to that? So if you look at all those top teams or whatever, when they make these kind of small little line breaks and they're getting past the defensive line, then they have the ability to be able to score within the next 3, 4, 5 phases. Munster are actually doing really well in between the 210s, but their ability then, once they make a line break, for whatever reason, maybe that's another component that they have to put together, but that they make that line break pay. Like they have to be more aware of where the space is straight after that line break, their ability to be able to move the ball a little bit quicker. I thought Paddy Patterson did really well, but they had a good few, like a couple of line breaks. Obviously, John Ryan won, Diarmuid Brown won, but the next phase then is quick, but then the next one after that is slow. And, the better teams make, line breaks pay. And I think that's definitely a component for Munster's attack that they need to look at.
That's a really good point. Yeah, a really good point. The negatives, Niamh, quickly, we won't dwell on them. I think obviously...
just penalty count, line out.
Penalty count, line out, the defensive maul, and some of the errors again.
Yeah.
Need to be much better in those areas. I think if I'm going to review the last couple of matches, we're talking about some of the negatives, and this is something that's frustrating, but we have to be honest and sum up where Munster are at. They gave away 15 penalties in this game again, which is, it's very, very, very difficult that you see, and rarely you see a team winning a match when they give away those kind of number of penalties. Some of them, of course, you could argue. You always can argue some penalties in games. Ulster gave away 13, so there was 28 penalties. There was a high penalty count in the game.
It's very upset, yeah.
Conditions were difficult. But just you go back in the 7 matches that Munster played in the league, tries scored, 13 tries. So they're 16th. They're bottom of the table as regards tries scored. So that's pretty telling and frustrating. So you just mentioned it a minute ago. There's a lot of good stuff happening, but it's that finished article, and maybe it will come. And of course, 55 players used, a lot of chopping and changing, but some of the execution has been poor, particularly in the earlier matches. Okay. The last couple, it's been a lot better, and it's obviously very difficult to score tries against Leinster, even though Liam Coombs got a great try, to score against Ulster, to score lots of tries. But it's pretty telling. It's something that Munster were really good at in the last number of years. Tries, points scored and points conceded. They were right up near the top all the time. So they're very hard to break down, and they were pretty good at scoring tries. So that's pretty telling. So they're 16th. They've only 13 tries scored. Well, when you're only winning 2 games as well, it's not a surprise that they're
Yeah,
down there. Offloads in the 7 games, they've 63. So they're second
yeah,
in offloads. So that's shown us a certain thing. That's where some of the enthusiasm is coming from. If this was the Munster of last year and the year before and the year before, there's no way we'd have 63 offloads and be second in the offload stats in the league. Now, some would say it doesn't matter because you're not winning the games and who cares about offloads. But I just think it's pretty positive that they're trying to keep the ball alive. Defenders beaten 98. They're 10th in that. It's too low. They need to be up a little
yeah,
bit higher. And this is a frustrating one as well. Clean breaks. They've 18 clean breaks in the 7 matches, and they're 16th. They're bottom of the
yeah,
pile in that again. So it just shows there's a lot more work to be done in the attack. I think there's a lot of good stuff that's been done, and I think the shape has been really, really good, but it's just broke down a little bit. Then if you move on, that's attack. If you move on to defence, so points conceded, they're actually 14th, so 127. So defensively, they're not conceding a lot of points, to be fair to them. So that would suggest that there's something to work on there. Tries conceded as well, 17. They're 12th. So these are positives, I think, the defensive stuff and the work rate. And we haven't, to be fair, the effort level and the desire has been fairly good. There's been 1 or 2 matches we've questioned that kind of that fight and that emotional kind of spark that you need. It's been much better in the last 3 games anyway, I think. Tackle success, I think this comes back to missed tackles. It's 87%, they're 13th. So completing tackles and is a bit frustrating. Total tackles missed. So I'm giving some positives about what they've conceded as regards points and tries, but then total tackles missed is 154. So they're first. So they've missed the most amount of tackles in the league. So is that coming from the pressure from the opposition, the quality of the opposition, the number of players missing, the number of changes? That needs to change. So there's a number of things there. Lineouts, 14th, 71 lineouts won and 19 lost. So they're third in lost lineouts. And that's one that we've spoken about a lot.
yeah,
That set piece, how important it is. So there's a number of things there that are concerning, that need to get better. They have got it slightly better. I think the earlier games kind of showed up a lot of that. Penalties conceded, even though we keep saying they're very high, well, they're 16th. So there's 15 other teams conceding more penalties, which is unbelievable. So they've 86 penalties conceded. It's still very, very high. And 15 in the weekend is a lot. Turning the ball over is another one that kind of we've spoken a little bit about. I know I'm throwing a lot of turnouts lost, 84. So they're 4th in turnovers lost.
mm-hmm.
So I think if we summarize that, I think the missed tackles, the turnovers, and the line out are the 3 that jump out for me.
Yeah.
If you get them better, well, in a lot of these games, they could be nudging over the line and winning those matches. You think if you're not turning the ball over against Ulster a couple of times like they did, i.e. the line out, some breakdown stuff, knock-ons, execution, they possibly win that game. There was a big win in that first half. Ulster showed a lot of dominance with their power in the maul. But Munster probably win that game if their discipline is better, if their line out is better.
Yeah, look, because if your discipline is better, you're denying opposition teams entry points, and I think that's the big thing for Munster. I think that teams find it easier to get into Munster's scoring zone or 22 than say Munster. The likes of Munster find are the complete opposite. They have to work really, really hard to try and get into scoring positions. They get in there, and then we're talking about execution.
And
Whereas
that's
I
it.
feel like
That's what you're saying, Niamh. So, like, if we won't stay in this too long, but it's the try scored, it's the discipline, it's the lineouts and the turnovers. You get them better. So you said it a minute ago, and I thought it was a brilliant point from a coach's point of view. that you're doing really good for 2, 3, 4 phases. You get into a space where you find a little bit of space. You're stressing the opposition. You've got to execute then and score the try. So,
Yeah.
But look, it's been difficult. I think that with respect to Cardiff, Dragons, Connacht, they were the three that were really, really disappointing. And the second half against Zebra. So there's 4 games there that your try count should be a bit better, should be higher. So that's a summation of really the first 7 games as regards. The coaches will look at this. They'll know this stuff too. But I think in the next block, these are areas that they've really got to get better at. Even if they don't have players back, the younger players coming through, I think in the next couple of weeks, they've got to show them these pictures. And I'm sure the coaches have been, but there's a little bit of time now to review the block, take some positives out of it, but be aware of issues and situations that need to be a lot better. We've got to move on. Start of the week, hard again. This start of the week situation that we've come up with this year, we wanted to, when you're losing 5 games, it's hard. Who's your star of the week? You mentioned a couple of players there who had really good performances.
I think definitely Nobel cause. I think needs to go to John Ryan. I think he just coming back in played really well, I thought, and because he's also gone up so far away to the opposite end of the spectrum that he would have been used to playing with Munster, considering that he was a lot of kick chase last year. I thought Jack Crowley was really good again. You can really start to see him come into himself a lot more. He is aggressive as I love. He barks, and I like that. I like the fact that he's directing them around the pitch. But we've had a really good conversation off air, and I think you're dead right. I think we've got to go with Edwin at Dogpo this week. I thought came up with some really big turnover moments. Somebody who, as you said, wasn't supposed to play because there was a question mark over his injury fitness. But he was good. He was really, really good. He's a huge big presence, and I love the fact that he didn't shy away from Vermeulen when he was after Barron. He was the first one that went over, and it was almost a case of like the gentle giant coming in, just try and separate them up. He was so calm, and I love that. So yeah, look, I think he's had a really good first block, and I think we need to get excited about players like him, and hopefully keep pushing on.
So your star of the week officially is
Edwin Edogbo.
Right, okay. He deserves it, yeah. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I like the way, look, there was a few other big performances. Crowley. Dermot Byrne, I think, has really kind of stepped up a little bit as well.
He's explosive too. I like him. It's the way the game is going. I think, and it's funny. I don't think the line out are just down to the hooker. I think there's loads of cogs to it, but I do think that he's putting a lot of pressure on that Scanlon for sure.
Okay, we're nearly done. Ireland, South Africa. 2017, Ireland beat the last time they played, beat South Africa 38-3 in Dublin. It probably sparked the change in Rassie Erasmus, Jack Nienenberg going back to South Africa. That result, people were writing them off, saying that they're finished. They were humiliated in Dublin. They went on to win a World Cup in 2000, less than 2 years later, probably just around 2 years later. How important is this game, and does it really matter? They're in our pool next year in the World Cup. Does it really matter? We won't go into it too much because we'll have the South Africa team later on. But and who plays for Munster? Does Peter O'Mahony play? Does Tadhg Byrne play? Are they the only 2 Munster players that'll start? Most probably. Yeah,
look, I think so. I think it's a good game. I think it's going to be a really good insight for how Ireland deal with the physicality of South Africa. It's totally different to New Zealand, say, or in Australia. And they'll be going after certain things. They tick those boxes. They're going to be full of confidence heading into that World Cup group next year. And it's all geared towards that. I think Andy Farrell has been so smart in how bad he's got about business over the last 12, 15 months. I think it's been really, really good. And look, I think it is Peter O'Mahony and Tadhg Byrne as our only 2 starters. I would have been interested to see if Craig Casey, he's carrying an injury going into that camp, and if he's fully fit, is it him or Conor Murray on the bench, backing up Gibson Park, who, by the way, hasn't played yet this season. So does Craig Casey start those? So lots of things there for sure for us to delve into. But I think this is going to be a brilliant test of where this Irish pack are.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. I think obviously it's they're powerhouses, and will be interesting to see how Ireland cope with that. Ireland were brilliant, obviously, in New Zealand, so two great sides. It won't make any difference because history will tell us what happened the last time. But South Africa won't want to come to Dublin and certainly lose the match at all. But that scoreline was incredible. I'm interested in see how Gavin Coombs goes, Jeremy Loughman, possibly Roman Salanoa as well. Will he get a start? Shane Daly, Jack Crowley, Diarmuid Byrne. The opportunity they have at the weekend when they play New Zealand on Friday night. It is a brilliant chance for them to. And someone like Gavin Coombs, I think this could be a really important couple of weeks to really kind of make a name for himself at this level. I think he has all the credentials to be a top-class international player. He probably needs to be more, if there's any criticism, he needs to be more involved and a little bit more aggression at times. He's a brilliant footballer, and just needs to be on it more often in the games. You look at Doris, who I think is an incredible player at 6 or 8, but just he's continuously getting his hands on the ball, doing things, brilliant defensively. Coombs has the opportunity to do that and been in around the Irish squad again. He was on tour in New Zealand. So it's a great opportunity for those guys in the next couple of weeks, I think. Obviously Dave Kilcoyne, he's back from an injury in a tough situation. Munster, he'll be trying to get himself back into that mix again. So it'll be an interesting couple of weeks particularly with the internationals. We probably won't have that. That's just a reality. Maybe 2 players, 3 players involved in the senior side. But the A game is a great opportunity on Friday night to see where those young players can go and what kind of a name they can make. We're nearly done. We didn't mention it last week because we didn't know at the time. Kieran McDonald from Glasgow, he's born in Glasgow, played with Glasgow. His situation with Wasps, obviously, is like John Ryan, ended. Munster signed him short term. He's 6'8", 120 kilos. He's a big man, warmed up with the team on Saturday. And he'll certainly help. Thomas Ahern is going to be out for a number of months. That's why this has happened. And I just think the injuries, and we've spoken about it a lot, have really hurt this team. They've hurt the coaches as well. It's made it very frustrating. We haven't seen any of Anton Frisch either, which they need him back too. So Thomas Ahern being out for a number of months is difficult.
It's huge, very difficult. I feel really sorry for him because he felt like he was just about to explode. And you talk about bolters for the World Cup. In my mind, I was like, maybe not, but you could almost think maybe Thomas Ahern or an Edwin Adogbo could sneak in there if they're going as well as they are. But look, really tough for him, a young player. But Jeannie Mac, I saw Kieran McDonald warming up. He is monstrous. He is very big man. And so look, I don't know a huge amount about him in relation to his ability to play, but he's going to be big, he's going to be physical, kind of like a Jason Jenkins type. We've seen how that has went for Leinster when he's got back fit. Something that Munster fans probably found it difficult to watch. But look, I think it's just they've been really unfortunate with the injuries and the positions of them. So let's hopefully look, he might be a good signing, and maybe they might be able to hold on to him till the end of the season if they need to. Yeah,
and obviously Munster don't play until the 26th against Connacht, who will have a pretty strong side coming down after those internationals. Bundy Aki will probably be back with them, and they're international guys. Will they play against Australia? It's unlikely, so they'll have a very strong side, and then Munster away to Edinburgh. So the first block, Niamh, we're done. Of matches, and it's been a poor return. We can't get away from the fact that there's plenty of mitigation there and there's plenty of injuries and excuses, but it's been really, really disappointing. I think it's really disappointing. I think there's 2 or 3 games in there that Munster should have won, didn't win, and it could come back to really hurt him at the end of the season. But it is what it is. I think we'll try and focus on the positives as much as we can.
Yeah.
And I think maybe for the future, I think there's young players here getting exposure that they may not have got, possibly should have got. And I've said this before about Jack Crowley. If he was in Leinster, he'd probably have 50 or 60 caps now for Munster. He doesn't have it. But it is what it is. It's been a disappointing start. That's it for episode 43 of the Red 78. Make sure you get your podcast straight to your phone every week. Just search the Red 78. And don't forget to get in touch with your thoughts. We'll be back next week, obviously, and we'll talk about the international or any other news in Munster. We might try and get a guest or two on as well in the next couple of weeks if we can. So don't forget to get in touch with your thoughts. And you can tweet us at our own personal Twitter account, or you can leave a tweet the Rugby at Rugby Channel 15, or search the Rugby Channel on YouTube and leave a comment. So that's it. Talk to you next weekend, Niamh. Enjoy the weekend's rugby, but please don't enjoy Spurs and Liverpool on Sunday. we're in a dreadful state, and
we're not much better.
I'm not listening to you next week. Will we take a draw? Will we shake hands on a draw on Sunday?
We will.
Okay.
Thanks a million, Queen.
Cheers, thanks.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
I'd like to think I know a lot.